Good afternoon. It's March 27th. We are here this afternoon just after 1:30 for the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee meeting. We are joined by the chair of the Council of Governments today, who also happens to be our colleague. And so welcome to Kate Stewart. Thanks for joining us. Council Member Juwando and I are here from the committee. We are not joined today by Councilmember Natalie Fountain-Gonzalez, who serves on this committee but can't make it today due to her accompanying the county executive and a delegation on an international business development trip. So we appreciate her work there, but wanted to acknowledge that as well. I'm really excited for today's conversation, which is an update and a discussion of a refinement of our county level housing targets. As we all know, and we talk about a lot, we have adopted the Council of Governments regional housing targets and how they relate specifically to Montgomery County. And we have used that as really an impetus behind much of our focus on housing over the last several years. I'm very proud of the work that we have done at the County Council and have continued in this new council term. But this committee really wants to take that to the next level, and I have really been interested in hearing what DC specifically has done in refining the housing targets on a more specific community by community basis to allow us to start having the real discussions, not necessarily in response to a particular policy proposal, but to have a real serious discussion of what are these targets actually mean when you break them down by specific areas within our region, within our county, and within our communities. What are the tools that we currently have? What are the tools that perhaps are available that we could consider? And how do you have a public conversation to discuss that? And so that really is what this is about. This is intended to be an overview of the COG targets to start. The DC experience, and we have representatives from District of Columbia who have joined us virtually, and then a conversation with our colleagues in the planning department to discuss what they are thinking in terms of moving this effort forward and what it could look like, and what considerations they will undertake. And then really this is intended to be an ongoing iterative process where we move forward, and my goal would be that ultimately this committee sends forward to the full council an effort and a resolution like we did in adopting the Council of Governments regional housing targets led by Councilmember Navarro. We will similarly do that with a more refined version, following in many ways the footsteps of what we've seen in DC, which I think has shown us a really good model for moving forward. That's the specifics. The why is obvious, and I think, as we all know, we have a housing affordability crisis in the county. We don't have enough housing to meet the needs of our community. We need more housing at all levels of income, and particularly for affordability levels that we are not producing and have not produced and need to produce more of. And so, we need to have that conversation. We recognize that our land is scarce and that land is expensive, and the ability to build housing on land is getting more and more expensive with construction costs and labor shortages and just the overall increase in the costs of housing as well. We have 7 years to meet our COG targets. We're not currently on a trajectory to meet them with the production levels that we currently have, and so it requires us to really take a deep dive, not waiting 7 years and recognizing that we haven't hit the numbers that we had hoped for and had intended, but really looking at it now, taking a deep dive, figuring out where we're at, holding ourselves accountable to the goals and targets that we have set, and making sure that we have specifics that we can hold ourselves accountable to, working with the planning department as council colleagues to move forward with various conversations and proposals on a community by community basis. So really appreciate that. We have Ms. Wilkerson here, regional housing planner from the Council of Governments, We have our planning department. Appreciate you joining us, and we have representatives from the DC Office of Planning who have implemented this, who will be joining us virtually. The order will start with Ms. Wilkerson after we hear from colleagues with any comments that they would like to add. Then DC we will hear from virtually, and then we will turn it over to our planning department, who will share their thoughts and ideas and how they intend to move forward, and the open questions that still remain that we want to talk through today so that they can begin to move forward and put together what will be a formal proposal. I will note that the intention here is to have a policy discussion at the county council, but have public engagement as we discuss these issues and make sure that we are reaching out to the community and having these conversations, like I said, not just in response to a particular proposal, whether you're for or against it, but really to have deeper conversations at a higher level, specific community by community, to understand what these targets actually mean, why we need them, why they're important, and what are the different options to accomplishing them, which this is really intended to do. So with that, why don't I turn to my colleague, Councilmember Jawando, if you have any thoughts or comments to kick us off, and then if Madam Chair of Council of Governments has thoughts, we'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Chair Friedson, and good to see Councilmember Stewart here. This is really good because you've got the chair of COG board this year, and you've got the chair of Region Forward and we all agree we need to produce more housing, and the chair of the Planning and Housing and Parks Committee. So you've got Montgomery County's on board with production of more housing to meet our targets at all levels. And I appreciate the fact that we're having this briefing. I often talk about the 3 Ps: produce, preserve, and protect. And production is number 1 in that order on purpose, because we have to build more housing and be more creative about the type of how we create more housing within the housing we have. And that's the kind of discussion that we will have around attainable and missing middle housing, which is happening in the region right now and across the country. And so I think it's really important to lean into that conversation and, to the chair's point, explain why we need it and what is or is not happening and what we can do, because we'll hear from our colleagues in DC and other places. This is a challenge not just for us, it's a challenge for the region, it's a challenge for the country to try to figure out how to create the right set of incentives, regulations, funding to have the type of housing that meets everyone's needs. And I don't know many places. I don't know of a place that's figured it out completely, but we're trying to be on the cutting edge of that. So, and I think we have the right professionals and we have the people who want to do it, so that everyone can have a place to live that's affordable, that meets their needs, and that welcomes people who want to move to this area because it's such a great area, or that want to stay here. So this is very important, and there will obviously be, as we get through the various components of how we meet this goal, I do think it's important to agree that we have the goal, right? Like that we need the housing. That's an important point. And we might have, we do have different thoughts about how we get there and what the right mix is. But I think it's not trivial to say that we actually have to produce more housing, particularly on the lower end, and how we get to that number. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Appreciate the committee pulling it together, and look forward to diving in.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. And Madam Chair, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Friedson, and thank you for convening this meeting today of the committee, and thank you to everyone who's here. It is a great honor this year that I get to chair the board of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We're a body that represents 24 jurisdictions in the DMV area, and as my colleagues have said, there are a lot of commonalities, and one of them is we all agree we do need more housing in our region. Getting to work on the COG housing targets has been terrific work, and I just again want to do a huge shout out to the staff at COG for all of your work on this. And I think it's important, as a Councilmember Jawando was talking about, we have a lot of buy-in on what the goal is, and I think it's important to underline having these targets, specific numbers that look at overall where we need to aim for, as well as in what areas and categories, is very important for us as a region. Because while we can agree on the goal of housing, having something to work towards, to hold ourselves accountable to, is how we're going to achieve those goals. And so I thank COG for putting that out there for all of us. It will be challenging, but I'm glad we're having this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your leadership at COG. It's great having two leaders and Council President Glass as well at Council of Governments, but chairing Region Forward, chairing the COG Board of Directors. We rely on the Council of Governments a lot. It's part of our regional strategy and working together with other governments to determine best practices and how to move forward really complicated policy issues. And there are few more vexing challenges that face local governments all over the country, throughout this region and well beyond, than housing. And it's one of our primary roles and responsibilities in land use to provide enough housing for the people that we have and the people we want to attract to come. And it's also one of the greatest challenges we have to actually fulfill that and make it happen. So with that, I'll turn it over. Ms. Dunn, if you have any introductory comments to frame the conversation, and then we can pass it over to Ms. Wilkerson with the Council of Governments.
Great. Good afternoon, and thank you. I'll just reiterate, you have a staff report that's linked to this agenda item for today. It provides the outline for how we're going to go through these conversations, and then after we have our presentations today, we will post online the presentation material that we're receiving. So I want the community to know that you'll see them during this conversation, and you'll have access to them as soon as we finish. With that, I would love to turn it over to Ms. Wilkerson, who is here from COG, to give us a broad background and overview of the COG housing targets for people who might be watching this but unfamiliar with that portion of it.
All right. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you all for having me today. My name is Sharon Wilkerson, and I'm the Regional Housing Planner at COG. I'm here today just to give an overview about the housing trends in the COG region. So just getting right into it, we all know housing matters. Housing is a foundation into the individual's quality of life, and not only is it important to an individual within the jurisdiction, having affordable housing creates the opportunity for a stronger economy and provides the chance to transform or improve the transportation systems within the jurisdiction. In 2019, the COG board adopted 3 housing targets: amount, accessibility, and affordability. Excuse me. The goals of each of the targets were to overall to add 75,000 new units in addition to what's currently being projected. 75% of those units should be in activity centers or near high capacity transit, and 75% of the new housing should be affordable to low and middle income households. And just as an overview of what's happening in the region, as you can see from this graphic, we are building more housing. However, we're still behind the goal of what is needed. And it's important to note that each year we fall behind on the housing targets, increases what is needed for the years to come. So it is kind of like, deepening the hole. Each year we miss the target. Moving forward, this chart is from the Coalition from Up for Growth. This is just to give a comparative landscape to the other metropolitan regions in the nation. Currently, the DC region ranks 4th behind Miami, New York, and Los Angeles in terms of the severity of underproduction within the regions. The next slide here we have is just the chart that shows the percentage of occupied housing types within the COG region. As you can see, while multifamily housing is one of the biggest factors into adding to our housing supply, it currently only accounts for about 1/3, which means there's definitely room for more growth in that area. That's just a circle. This next graph that we have just kind of details the number of new units that are being built each year. You can see that there is the account for the decrease from the pandemic, but there does seem to be a trend of moving upward. However, we are still behind. This next map shows that the multifamily units that are being built are fortunately meeting the goal of being built within the activity centers or near high capacity transit. This exceeds, in terms of multifamily units, this would exceed the COG target of having 75% set aside, or parameter that the COG board previously set. And then there's just a little fun fact about the NOMA area themselves. COG continues to support their jurisdictions in creating affordable housing. Specifically, we have the HAP program, which is the Housing Affordability Planning Program, which is funded by the Amazon Housing and Equity Fund. For the first round, we awarded 10 projects up to $75,000, including there was one awarded in Montgomery County. That was the Montgomery Housing Partnership. And they were awarded $75,000 for the residences at Forest Glen. So we really are looking forward to using this. We're having a new round forthcoming, so the dates about that should be announced within the next coming weeks. It's also important to note that while it's important to focus on the affordability of housing, it's also important that we focus that the housing we develop is equitable as well. So we ensure that the places are available to everybody. The way COG is doing that is working with some of our jurisdictions for the Regional Fair Housing Plan. The Montgomery County as well as the city of Gaithersburg are a part of that plan. It's currently open for public comment. It's closing on March 31st, so we encourage everyone to express your thoughts and let us know what you think with the link. But it is something that the COG region has been working on for a long time, and we're all really looking forward to seeing how that finishes. And just wrapping it up, all of the housing targets that we have all fall within the Region United framework for 2030 that COG has. The common idea is that if the problems are the same, that the solution should be the same as well. So all of these things that we're trying to work towards are all related with an emphasis of equity in the center mind of that. So COG is here to assist our jurisdictions, and we're very happy to have the opportunity to speak to you all and to assist Montgomery County as you all meet your housing targets and needs. So that is just the end of just to wrap it up, I'm sorry. The key findings that we have is that the region still needs more housing, and we're far below what the 2019 board targets were. That while that multifamily continues to be the driving force in adding to our housing supply, and accessibility in terms of all the new units that were built, just under half of them were all built within a half a mile of a metro rail station, and 28% of those were in a metro walk shed. And in terms of affordability and equity, changes in zoning and land use may be needed in order to provide diversity in terms of housing types and ensure access for everyone in all areas. So that is the end of my presentation. So I have my information here for you all if you want to reach out to me. But again, thank you all for your time and having me here.
Appreciate that. A couple quick comments and then a question for you. I'll turn it over to colleagues if they have any specifically for you. The first is, I think it's important to note the fourth greatest housing challenges, according to the survey that you were using. There's good news, bad news to this entire conversation. The good news is we're an incredibly attractive place for people to live. That's why we are not meeting the supply with the demand. The fact that we have high demand is that this is a great place to live, that we have a lot to offer. That's a good thing. So I don't want to lose sight of that part of it. If we had a tremendous number of vacancies and nobody interested in filling those vacancies, which there are jurisdictions around the country that have that problem, that's a much worse problem. So it's a problem. It's a very serious problem that requires a very serious set of solutions. but it's not the worst problem to have, that we have a very desirable place to live. So I just want to note that. If you looked at all the other areas on that list, they were all very desirable places to live. So I think that's important to note. And you don't want to be part of that group, but you kind of want to be part of that group. Depending on how you view it. I appreciate the last points that you were making in terms of the variety of tools in the toolkit. Without going into those individually, that's not really the purpose of today's conversation. I did want to call out, though, the Forest Glen project, the $75,000, which we heard about a couple months ago. Very exciting, and I will just note there were significant efforts during that master plan process to make Forest Glen a more attractive place to invest in, a place that was able to help address the affordable housing challenges that we had. And that project demonstrates what can happen when you provide the ability to do something and you allow for the possibility of additional levels of support and subsidy, which is essentially what has happened here. So I think I don't want to dive into exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it, because that's the later conversations for other days, but I think it's illustrative of the regional targets and goals layered into the local zoning changes, layered into partnering with affordable housing providers and property owners to be able to move these efforts forward, and how all of these different issues intertwine to move these targets forward and actually bring these goals to life. So I think that was really helpful. The one question that I had for you, which I think is important, because there's a lot of conjecture about the COG housing targets, and it's very much part of the conversation. Could you just describe how you came up with the numbers, why they are what they are, why you think they're important, and why you stand by them as a critical target for the region to achieve?
So answering this question in full transparency, I was not an employee of COG at the time when these targets were made. So I don't have that answer, but I have written it down so I can go back and have that personally sent to you. I believe that I can tell you my personal opinion, but I don't have the personal knowledge of how they came up, what factors were used at this current time. There might be someone else who might be able to answer.
Why don't we can turn to planning on that, and you can answer this. Ms. Scavone from planning will introduce the whole team, but if you could answer this question, because I think it is very important to this conversation. So why don't we start there, and then we're not going to go into the full planning conversation now, but if you could speak on behalf of the COG targets, which you've been intimately involved in, that would be helpful.
Sure. So just very briefly, and we'll go over Montgomery County specific targets during our portion of the presentation, but back in 2019, there was the Transportation Board basically found that housing was our Achilles heel, that we weren't getting the employment growth that we needed to sustain job growth because our lack of housing production. And so just to reiterate, there's a region-wide cooperative forecast, and the housing targets are based on round 9.1, which was done in 2018. And basically the share, each jurisdiction's share is the percentage of that forecast. So for example, in Montgomery County, we are predicting a household growth from 2020 to 2030 of 31,000 households. Now, on top of that, the region needs to build 75,000 more. And our share of that is 10,000 units, because we are 13% of the forecast. The region-wide household growth is 13%. I know that was very technical, but it's basically based on the COG forecast, the cooperative round 9.1, and our share of the region-wide household growth from 2020 to 2023.
So this is the housing for the households that we anticipate we will grow to absorb over the next period of time. That's
right.
That's what this was done in order to accomplish.
Correct. So Montgomery County,
with households and people require housing. This is the basic level of infrastructure, the most basic level of infrastructure, perhaps, to absorb the additional households that we project as a region and then specifically within Montgomery County.
Right, so we have that, we think that we're forecasting 31,000 households from 2020 to 2030. And then we have an additional share allocated on top of that of 10,000 household units to kind of make up for that back production that Ms. Wilkerson was talking about, that we haven't produced enough.
Okay, I just think that's important. There has been a lot made about what is zoned and what is not zoned and what that means. I would just note about zoning, because I think it's related to this, the idea that there is sufficient level of zoning to accomplish a certain goal is like saying there's enough food in the world to prevent hunger. If the food that people need is not in an accessible place for those people to get it, people starve. So I just think it's very important when this comes up. It's the same idea if you told people, well, don't worry, I know you wanted fresh produce in your grocery store. The grocery stores near you are all out, the ones that you actually shop at. But don't worry, there is a grocery store all the way across the county that you may not want or travel to that has plenty of produce. Well, guess what? That doesn't do anything for the family that needs the produce in the grocery store that's near their home. So same thing with housing. The housing needs to be in places where the market is willing to build it, where people want to live in it, and it all has to work together. And I just think it's important that we not get caught up in ideas that are removed from reality in order to move this conversation forward in a serious way. So I appreciate you delving into that and describing it. I think it's very important as we have these conversations for moving forward. Turn to Councilmember Joando and then Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah. I appreciate that, and I want to pick up on that point. I mean, you could theoretically fit every human being on the planet into Texas, based on square footage, but you wouldn't, and you can't. Right, so I think that's an important point about the zoning, but there's also an important point that we have to analyze why is this, the questions of the why. Okay, if it is zoned for capacity, why is it not happening? And I think there has been a dominant narrative there that is, well, it's too expensive, or we need to have more incentives, and that could be part of it and is part of it because we've seen action happen. But there's also a narrative, I think we need to dig deeper on that question and create both carrots and sticks around that question. And that's something we've talked about before. For example, you shouldn't be able to sit on an approval forever, right? And there should be an incentive to move on, create some competition. So I agree that, the idea that it's all zoned, that's not going to produce it, because we have to use the levers. And I just want us to have more levers. That's always what I'm trying to push us to do. And Ms. Scavone and my planning partners and my colleagues know that. Could you talk, I would like you to just talk about the composition, because I think it's really important. So much of what we face in Montgomery County, in this region, is the changing nature of who we are. We had the demographic trends report recently that planning presented before us. And it continues to be stark. And I think it's reflected in who we are projecting is going to come here and what level of income housing that we need. And it was alluded to a little bit by Ms. Wilkerson. But if our team could put a finer point on, of that 31,000 plus 10, you're basing that off of modest population growth. How does that jive, and hopefully I'm asking you this in a way that you can answer it at a high level, with other trends as far as the demographics of who's moved here and why that, and what makes up that new housing and what levels of affordability we need in that housing? Does that make sense?
Sure. So for Thrive 2050, Thrive Montgomery 2050, we completed a housing needs assessment that kind of forecasted what type of future incomes that we think are coming here and what type of housing they would need. And we basically find that there is a mismatch. 1 out of every 2 new households is low income. We know that we are growing at the two extremes, so we're growing at the high end
right.
and the low end, but not really in the middle. And so that impacts, our housing supply, because it's not, the supply and demand aren't really matching.
And it also impacts what we talk like the filtering effect, right? Like if your growth is at the far ends, it doesn't that doesn't help as much, or you have what we see where you have people getting, people are innovative, they come together and live in places with more people than should be in places, and just trying to make it. So I think that's a really important point. 1 and 2 are low income as defined. Define that for millions.
I believe it's from the census data. I believe they make under $50,000.
Under 50,000. So that's significant. That was not the case 40 years ago of who was, in the same proportion. And I use 40 now because I just turned 40. That's my marker now. I'm going to use 40 all year as my marker. So, but I just think we need to. So our solutions have to also address the scale and scope of the problem. While it's not fair to say there's enough zoning, so we'll build it. It's also not fair to, we have to have a solution that meets the need of who's coming, and that's not just going to be building certain types of housing or very high-end housing. We're going to have to do everything. So I just think that's important to talk about as well. So appreciate you illuminating that.
Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you. Council Vice President Friedson, you asked about, and Ms. Scavone gave some of the history on the targets and where they came from, and I just wanted to expand upon that a little bit because there was so much work and cooperation. I know you all know that really well, that this was really something that started in 2018 and 2019 and was a regional effort of the Planning Director's Technical Advisory Committee that COG brings together. And that is representatives from across the region, and working with the Housing Director's Advisory Committee as well to really assess and look at, as you mentioned, the forecasts for our regions. And this went through Region Forward Committee, the board, and a number of iterations looking at the data that was collected. And so it was a very iterative process, it was actually a very enjoyable one, I will say, being on the COG board at the time, looking at the cooperation across the region and setting these. And I want to underscore also how historic this is, that we had 24 jurisdictions in our region all agree to these targets, these regional targets on housing. I mean, if you think about how diverse our region is, and that we were able to come together and agree and adopt these housing targets, that is really saying something for our region, and the excellent work of COG and all the housing directors and staff we have in the region. And I did just want to put a plug in on our April meeting of the COG board. We will be looking at the new forecasts for the regions. So it's going to be a really interesting meeting, and I hope people tune in for that as well.
Great. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts or comments from colleagues on this portion of the conversation? Okay, why don't we shift gears to DC. Thank you, Ms. Wilkerson, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and thank you to you and your colleagues for all of your work. Appreciate you joining us. We have virtually joining us, I believe, Drew Hubbard, Sakina Khan, and Art Rogers from the DC Planning Office. I'm going to see if staff can bring them in. Yeah.
Can you hear us? Or me?
Yes, we can hear you. I don't think we see your video yet. Oh, there we go. All right, 3 for 3. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, and thanks for setting the model that we are trying to adopt here in Montgomery County.
Thank you very much. We do have a presentation that we had sent in, or we can share it via this link.
Yeah, Sakina, if you don't mind, could you share it, please?
Okay, great. My colleague Art will share it. So as he's doing that, I'll just introduce ourselves. So I am Sakina Khan. I'm the Deputy Director for Citywide Strategy at the DC Office of Planning. I'm also the current co-chair of the COG Planning Director Technical Advisory Committee. I'm joined by Art Rogers, who is our Senior Housing Planner OP, and by Drew Hubbard, who is the Deputy Director of the Department for Housing and Community Development in DC. I'd like to first thank the council members in the committee for inviting the district to share information on the efforts that we undertook to address housing equity, and in particular the development of affordable housing targets for planning areas within the city. Our work began in earnest around 2018, 2019 on the basis of a robust set of existing housing programs and affordable housing tools, but a recognition that more needed to be done. And so under the mayor's guidance, this was a multi-agency effort with the development of goals and the housing equity report that was led by the Office of Planning. In coordination with partner agencies, including DCHD, who also has led our implementation, and we'll speak to that today. So next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of what we'll be covering, we'll talk through why we identified the need to focus on housing equity, and then we'll talk about the mayor's order that directed agencies to work together to reach citywide goals for the production of housing, including affordable, and how the multi-agency partnership included a housing equity report and area-specific goals, which we developed alongside our comprehensive plan update. And lastly, we'll share information on implementation, including monitoring of progress. So next slide, please. So why housing equity? We wanted to explore the links between housing, affordability, and how place and community affects resident opportunity. So we first analyzed and confirmed that the current distribution of affordable housing is inequitable. We acknowledged that this was based on a legacy of exclusionary and discriminatory policies, and that the inequitable distribution affected life expectancy and economic opportunity for residents. There was a growing body of research at the time, including some folks might be familiar with Raj Chetty's Opportunity Insights work, that found residents have very different economic outcomes depending on where they live, and that specifically low-income children living in high-opportunity neighborhoods would experience better life outcomes than their peers in low-income neighborhoods. And so focusing on housing equity and choice could promote better life outcomes. Next slide, please. So just taking a bit of a deeper dive into where we were in 2019 when we were starting this work. The district had gone through a period of economic and population growth, which had accelerated around 2010 onwards. And growth had started to put pressure on our housing market and on rents and on residents. By 2019, thousands of new housing units had helped slow the rise of rents. However, supply was not keeping up with demand. And this put pressure on various types of residents and households, including seniors, families, low-income households, and others, and affected the ability of residents to stay or be in their neighborhoods of choice. And so in 2019, the mayor laid out her challenge, and that was that the district aimed to develop 36,000 additional housing units by 2025, of which 12,000 would be affordable. And both of these district goals would accelerate the pace of what we had been able to achieve up until that point. And then these district goals were developed alongside the housing goals for the region, which COG spoke to in terms of the 240,000 new units by 2025. Next slide, please. So part of addressing what we needed to do included understanding our existing tools at the time and whether these tools needed to be refined and or supplemented. So in 2019, we did have an array of local and federal programs that specifically targeted housing production and affordable housing production. For example, our affordable housing trust fund was larger than any other in the US on a per capita basis. And we had a variety of other tools as well, including, of course, inclusionary zoning and a number of grant and fund programs. So we were doing a lot, but we realized that the need was still greater and that we needed to do more and that we could do more. And so, next slide, please. The mayor's order on housing directed various agencies to work together and deliver on the 36,000 new housing units by 2025, of which 12,000 would be new dedicated affordable. The order had a lot of components to it, but the highlights included ensuring that new housing could address the diverse needs of all of our residents, that we would accelerate both production and preservation, that we would create homeownership opportunities, and most importantly, that we would establish the goals for area-specific affordable housing targets and a timeline. And then we were also, as part of the order, recognizing that the housing market is not just the DC market, it is connected to the regional housing market. And we were very supportive of the COG regional housing goals. Next slide, please. And so we embarked on what became the Housing Equity Report. Some of you may have seen this report, at least recognize it by its cover, which is shown on this slide. And the goal was to reshape the district's thinking and propose new ways to approach where, what type, and how affordable a housing should be. As part of that report, we needed to confirm the inequitable distribution of housing, acknowledge the legacy of exclusionary policies, and we needed to do a deep dive on understanding housing supply, land capacity, population growth, and resident needs. We were also in the midst of our comprehensive plan, as I mentioned, and so there was an opportunity to connect our work on equity across both our equity report and our comprehensive plan. So I'll hand it over to Art Rogers, who will present on how we approach the development of the report, and then Drew will discuss how we began implementing the goals and tracking our progress.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Can you hear me? My name is Art Rogers. I'm the Senior Housing Planner at Office of Planning, and I'm happy to present how we approached developing our housing equity goals. So the first challenge for us was to establish a level of geography that would achieve two things. It was small enough that we could ensure that we were delivering an equitable distribution of affordable housing across the district, but also large enough to embrace a variety of tools by which we could achieve those goals. We didn't want to get too tied into too small of a geography, which would limit the type of tools that we might use. And these might be increases in density for inclusionary zoning. These might be targeting our trust fund. This might be targeting accessory apartments in the area, a whole variety of tools. And so we wanted to be able to have the flexibility to approach delivering those goals based on what were the conditions in that community. So we looked at our wards, we looked at census tracts, we looked at a whole range of geography. But basically, and being from the Office of Planning, it made a lot of logical sense for us to use our planning areas. They are part of our comprehensive plan. They reflect differences across the city in terms of land use and geographic barriers. And I think perhaps most importantly for the goals was that they are designed for long-term policy and implementation and monitoring, and we'll go into that. So once we had that geography, we basically simply mapped where we had dedicated affordable housing. And for that term, dedicated affordable housing meant that it had to be cost restricted to make it affordable. It had to be restricted by income, and it had to have long-term controls. And so those three factors, we looked at where we had a supply of affordable housing, and we mapped across those 10 planning areas of the District of Columbia. And you can see from this chart, from the map, the distribution across the city. There are big concentrations in some parts of the city and very few units in other parts of the city. And I think this was most powerful when we went out to the community and engaged the community through a variety of ways. Basically, we went to where the community was congregating. Big public meetings, housing fairs, farmers markets. We went to a variety of places, and we surveyed residents of the District of Columbia by attending those functions, but also doing an online survey to gauge how people felt about this distribution. And one of the remarkable things about the survey was it really helped us understand that there was broad support across the whole city that this current distribution of affordable housing was not fair and not equitable. And so that one step, I think, was a really key step for us to take, and it really helped us in formulating our goals over the next several years. So that led to basically a short-term goal and a long-term goal. I'm actually going to start with the long-term goal first. The long-term goal was that each planning area should have 15% of its housing stock as affordable by the year 2050. And in some cases, there were planning areas that were already at, say, 40 or 50% more of their stock was affordable. And in the case of, for instance, Rock Creek West, which is up Connecticut and Wisconsin, it was less than 1% of the supply of housing was affordable in that area. And so to achieve that goal of 15% across each planning area by 2050, we had to set ourselves on a path, on a trajectory in the short term to achieve that goal in the long term. And so what you see here is the results of our short-term goals are for 2025, and you can almost see a reverse of the size of the dots between the first map and the second map. And so, for instance, Rock Creek West, where we had the fewest affordable units, we said we really need to provide a range of opportunities at different levels of affordability, different unit types, and deliver those units in that area, again, to reach this long-term goal of 2050. We knew the legacy of all these planning decisions and FHA, redlining, and all sorts of public policy tools that resulted in a legacy of where people could live. We knew that it could not be solved overnight. And so we projected that we could do this and reach this by 2050. So I think this slide really helps us understand the context of the district's housing supply. And it also talks to one of the ways that we would have to be able to deliver these units, whether they're market rate units or affordable units. So first of all, our single family stock is relatively fixed. We cannot grow that stock in the District of Columbia, but it also represents 75% of our larger 3-bedroom units for families. And also that subset of those single family homes that are rental are also very important for families who need to rent. We have a lot of missing middle in the District of Columbia, and so that tends to be in our closer in neighborhoods. And I know that's a topic across the region about supporting missing middle. And the most important thing for us, though, was to achieve our housing goals. We recognize that 95% of our future growth was going to have to be in larger multifamily buildings. And this came down to not just the equity of the affordable housing, but where growth should be happening but was not happening. And so one of the important steps that we knew we needed to take was to take a fresh look at those areas where growth was not happening but should be happening, and make some changes. So that leads me into the conversations that we had after publishing the Housing Equity Report, and how those conversations fed into the adoption of the comprehensive plan, and most importantly, the changes to our land use map, the changes in density to accommodate that growth that I spoke about. And we basically took an approach of density along our major corridors and at our metro stops. But I think the important thing about this, though, was we continued that community conversation after we published the equity report, and really helped people understand the legacy of those decisions. And I think if you talk to our neighborhood planners today, it really did change the conversation around affordable housing, and we now get a lot of support for affordable housing in areas where it was previously very difficult to get those units approved. And so that concludes my portion of the presentation. I'm now going to hand it over to Drew Hubbard, the Deputy Director at DHCD, to talk about the tools we created through implementation and the tracking.
Good afternoon, council members. Again, thanks for having us. So I think just to start, and continue on with the discussion we've been having so far, here at the DC Department of Housing and Community Development, our role is to really shepherd and run most of the production and preservation programs in the city, as well as some other regulatory programs and efforts, including execution of the inclusionary zoning program and some of the other attendant programs that are really going to help shape this discussion. But moving into the realm of actually getting the equity report into practice had us really look at our current offerings, as you saw some of them earlier. The largest kind of revolves around our Housing Production Trust Fund, which serves as our major funding source for gap financing for the production, for the financing of production units. So going from there, and also looking at what else we could add to our toolbox to really be more intentional about how we approach this, and looking at the work that OP had done to really show us where the need was. Our mayor had committed to and followed through on making sure the resources were there. And we needed to really be intentional about how to really be serious about looking at areas of the city that are amenity rich, that didn't have the amount of affordable housing that we wanted to see spread across the different parts of the city. So as you see in this slide, one of the ways we were looking to do that was, again, through looking at our current inclusionary zoning program, which called for a certain percentage of units to be set aside in the production of new multifamily buildings. And when they would come before the city for amendments that would increase density, having that level of required affordability also go out to, and it'll be on a sliding scale, up to 20% of the concerns for that new building. We also, again, we run a consolidated RFP where all of our different funding sources that were referenced earlier are put in a pool, and we accept proposals for production and preservation of affordable housing units, the majority of which are multifamily, but we also accept proposals for homeownership projects too. But we were keen and looking again to be very intentional about how we set our RFP, and in advance of that, how our qualified action plan really would reflect some of the priorities that we were trying to achieve, mainly geographically, looking at the high amenity planning areas so that we could attract development proposals for those parts of the city. Again, also looking at the number of bedrooms in these proposals, and other things that we wanted to really influence as these projects came in for requesting funding. We also, again, got more intentional about how we look at the production of units that serve folks at 0 to 30% of MFI, and the construction financing and gap financing is one thing, but we made sure that we were really intentional about really marshaling and making sure that our local rent supplement program, which is in place to really help that population, the portion of which that we were able to really leverage our project-based vouchers that would attach these units to make sure that as we are taking these proposals in, that we have the operating subsidies that really help produce units at 0 to 30%. And again, besides just the RFP and requesting proposals, we wanted to look at other ways that we could really incentivize getting more units under covenant in some of our higher amenity neighborhoods. And one of the approaches was what you see here on the screen, our HANTA program, which covers 4 of the 10 planning areas that we need to really add more units in. And again, the idea was that we would provide funding in exchange for putting what would otherwise be market rate units under covenant at 80% MFI, and at least a third of those would be set aside at that affordability level. Again, as we were being intentional, knowing what the need was, kind of a more recent need, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is actually also looking at how we make more housing available and look at converting some of our commercial space downtown into housing. So again, there's a proposal out from the mayor looking at creating a downtown tax abatement for housing. And you'll see in slides coming up, looking at our goals to add a significant amount of 15,000 new residents and housing for 15,000 new residents in our downtown corridor. And then lastly, as far as new initiatives in this area, again, we wanted to look at not only our multifamily offerings, but how we can increase homeownership, and specifically homeownership among African Americans in the city. And the mayor paneled a Black homeownership strike force over this summer, where we developed policies really to look at really undoing some of the more negative policies of the past that really created inequity among demographics when it comes to homeownership in the district. So again, that is another focus. I can move to the next slide. So as I referenced a second ago, one of the more newer areas is really looking at conversion of uses of space downtown to attract housing and build housing for 15,000 new residents to be added to the downtown area by 2028. What we are looking again, that is kind of the short-term goal, but as you see, the larger number of 87,000 downtown residents that we're looking to accommodate in the future. So the idea is this: we have several stable older neighborhoods that have more of a mix between residential use and other mixed use activities, including NOMA, looking at newer communities like around Navy Yard that have delivered substantial amount of new units over the last decade, and some of our traditional neighborhoods like Georgetown and the like that have a different mix. So really looking at how we can get our downtown to look more like some of those areas of the city that have already achieved more of this balance. And again, you see the goal of 15,000 for the short term. Next slide. So this is where we are. As you've heard before, our goal was set in 2019 by mayor's order and through our equity report informing it. To date, for the larger goal of 36,000 new units, we've produced a total of 28,279, which, as you see, is 79% of the target. And then of the 12,000 that are to be affordable, we are at just over 7,000 new affordable units that have delivered in that time period. We're at 59% of the target, and we are on track to meet our goal by 2025. We have about 3,800 additional affordable units in our pipeline currently, which represents about $540 million of financing that the city has put up for this purpose. What I will just pause and say to really amplify that, our mayor has committed to appropriating, or at least proposing, at least $100 million of new financing for our production trust fund each year. And she has done that consistently for the past 9 years, including her proposal for the new budget proposal that just came out. But we are keenly aware, in order to meet our goals, we'd have to really increase that amount of funding. So for the last 2 fiscal years, that amount has actually gone up to over $400 million a year, which reflects why we have the ability to have the amount of units in our pipeline moving towards closing and production and delivery. And then I will end on this last slide. This is the breakdown of our different planning areas. So if you know the different areas, you saw the map earlier of where we were trying to intentionally look at where traditionally, most of our affordable housing has been produced, both subsidized and otherwise, on the eastern side of the city. Again, we set our goals to really look at those high amenity neighborhoods and planning areas where we really want to get towards that goal of having 15% of the total be affordable. And as you see, the progress we've made so far, this is where we're coming in with some of the other strategies like HANTA, other proposed tax abatements, incentives, besides just our regular RFP process, where we can look at creating more dedicated affordable housing in the different planning areas that we're trying to reach.
Mr. Rogers, before you move on, I want to make sure that because we use different vernacular, newly covenanted existing would be preservation of existing units that come under some type of affordability agreement with the district?
Yes.
Versus production would be inclusionary zoning or some other, LIHTC or some other restriction that happens at the time it's built. I just want to make sure I think I know what it is. I think colleagues probably do, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that, because newly covenanted existing is just not a vernacular that we use here. So I just want to make sure that
Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So again, you see where we are as far as our goals by planning area. Point out two of our targeted planning areas are along our common border between the district and the county. So really looking at again the upper northwest part of the city and Capitol Hill and some of the other areas where we are focused on increasing the overall number of units that are available at the different affordability levels. And again, and I think you're right to point out too, the other side of this equation is preservation. And when we talk about net new, we can't go without making sure that we're preserving our existing units so that we're not losing as we gain, so that we are truly looking at net new units.
Great. Well, thank you.
That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to stay on for a bit longer if there are any questions.
Yes, that would be great. First of all, thank you so much for your work, and it really is extraordinary, and I think there's a lot here that we want to borrow from, so we hope that you will see it as the great form of flattery as it is intended. I would love to have a subsequent conversation. We can go into all the different tools that you use. For instance, if you could share, we have inclusionary zoning. In many ways, Montgomery County invented the concept of inclusionary zoning, which DC and jurisdictions all over the country now have. I think it's helpful if you could share what your inclusionary zoning is, and if you made any changes as part of this exercise, and similarly, some of the tools including tax abatements that you talked about. Have you seen any responses to those policy changes yet, or is it too early to determine what has worked and what hasn't worked? I mean, obviously, we're relatively in the infancy of some of these proposals, and so I just, the first question would be, if you could share, your inclusionary zoning numbers, what we call MPDUs, moderately priced dwelling units, as part of new construction, and then the other financing and tax abatement that you mentioned here as part of this exercise, and whether or not there's been any adoption of that, and if it's helped to reach some of these goals. Because obviously our first goal here is to set the targets. The second is to actually reach the targets. It's I always talk with the Seinfeld reservation. Take the reservation, but really keeping the reservation is the whole point of the reservation. So if you could just share that with us briefly, that would be helpful.
If I could just preface that a little bit too, and this, should go without saying, but I think one of the fundamental ways that we have been intentional about getting at this is making sure we're talking to each other. So the work between the Office of Planning, DHCD, as well as our public housing entity, DCHA, and our Housing Finance Agency, to make sure not only do we know what it is, we want to get there. So we have regular housing partner meetings where we discuss these different initiatives, look at where we are, so we can tweak and add and refine.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point. And those housing partnership the collaboration really started with the mayor's order. And so being able to do the analysis, the planning, develop the policy, do the implementation, track it, it is truly a cross-agency effort that was all guided up front by the mayor, and has been successful. And then as we go through this process, we're able to refine as needed in coordination with our partners. Art, do you want to speak to some of the specifics around IZ and perhaps the tax abatement?
Sure. So our IZ program has a base requirement that varies between 8 to about 12.5%, depending on the type of construction that's being used. And that's mapped generally across all multifamily zones and several single-family zones. It is not mapped in downtown, where we have no bonus density to give. And so that's just the bones of our program. It targets 60% of AMI for rental and 80% of AMI for ownership. And I think what we did when we recognized that we weren't getting the affordable housing that we wanted to get in certain areas, we did two things. I mentioned the changes in density that we adopted through our comprehensive plan process. And the second part of that was what we call the IZ Plus program that Drew mentioned. So when a developer applies for a rezoning in accordance with those increases in in density of our land use map, it triggers the IZ Plus program, which would raise the requirement up to 20% of the project, as much as 20%, but it is a sliding scale based on the overall increase in density. So that was, I think, and we tried to test the impact the same way we tested the matter of right bonus density, to ensure that it would work. It was a discretionary, right? They don't have to apply for a map amendment. So we did want to err on the side of potentially increasing the value of their property, but leveraging more affordability out of it. Because if it was neutral or if it harmed them, they would never even apply for those map amendments, and we wouldn't get any additional units. So that required an extensive amount of stakeholder engagement with developers and modeling what the potential impacts would be. That's, I think, at this stage, what I can share about IZ Plus. We have had some projects apply for it yet. I don't think there's been any approvals. I'll have to check with our development review division. Drew, I think you actually might be better to talk about HANTA.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the current fiscal year budget, we were able to pilot the HANTA tax abatement program. As soon as we actually put the availability on the street, we got several projects and development teams that were interested, and I believe we are close to being at our cap for that funding. So the interest was immediate to take advantage of HANTA.
Great. I'd really appreciate if you could share with us, if you're willing, any positives and negatives of some of those policy proposals. I will note, our housing stock and our communities are different than DC. There are some overlaps that are very similar. Some of our more residential areas close in are similar to your residential areas out, so to speak, away from the downtown core. Some of our urban areas are similar than some of your urban areas, but obviously we have a bit of a broader breadth of land use types and some of the challenges in terms of exclusively commercial or overwhelmingly commercial areas that you are working very hard to try to add residential and more of a mixed use environment that the mayor has really focused on recently, in particular, coming out of COVID. We don't have that same challenge here. So there's a lot to learn, but I also think we need to understand, and it's important for us to recognize that there are some land use differences in terms of the jurisdictions and the size and scope, but I think it's incredibly helpful and important. So on the HANTA program, I would love to learn about who is applying and how it's working, and we have looked at our own types of tax abatements in different areas, and I think it's instructive to learn, what is working and not working in certain areas as well. And the inclusionary zoning and density dynamics. I think it's important to note. We sometimes forget Montgomery County's 15% of all new zoned areas is a very high number relative to other places. DC, as we heard, 8 to 12.5% in a standard way, and then up to 20% in the density bonus dynamic, where you're getting something in exchange for that. So really appreciate it. I would love to follow up with you. I'm sure colleagues will as well, and really appreciate all of your work. I want to acknowledge as well the mayor's leadership regionally in advancing the affordable housing conversation. I think there are few people in the region who have really emphasized and put this issue to the forefront more than the mayor has, and so I wanted to express my appreciation and our appreciation for all of the work that she is leading on when it comes to affordable housing, and that you all are executing on at her direction. So really wanted to express appreciation for that, and thank you for joining us virtually. We really appreciate it. I realize I'm kind of looking at the screen at you here, but you're really up here, so apologize if it seems like I'm not looking at you when I'm speaking to you, but at least to me it seems like I am looking at you, even though to you it doesn't. So with that, unless any colleagues have any questions or concerns, we appreciate you joining us here virtually, and we are going to transition now to our third panelists. We have our planning department here, and as we heard earlier, we have Ms. Gavoni, who is the resident expert at planning on housing. Really appreciate all of her expertise. We have Director Stern, and we have Chair Zients, and we have Mr. Sartori as well, who are here to join us. I will turn it over to Chair Zients first, and then I'll have it turn it over to colleagues. I believe there is a presentation that Ms. Gavoni will go through at the appropriate time. But with that, I'll turn to you, Mr. Zients.
Thank you. I want to make sure the council understands how difficult it will be to achieve the target for the Council of Governments. And the reason for that is it's on top of our forecast. Our forecast is a projection of what we will do. It includes all of our efforts in the past of what we do for housing and how much housing we're getting. On top of that, we are saying we will do about 20% more, 25% more, depends how you calculate. That's a significant number. Anytime you have an incentive that you offer, up until you exceed the forecast, you'll never know whether you're doing that as part of the forecast or part of the target. Now the District of Columbia made an interesting distinction. It had a separate target for affordable housing, which is not part of the overall forecast that we're doing. But they're targeting very specifically what they're doing. And that's something that may be more controllable, but again, to the extent that you're trying to exceed our own forecast, it's a very, very difficult job. In that regard, one other thing. It's nice to get to smaller areas. It's a good thing to get to smaller areas, to put the housing that you want where you want it. Just be cautious on how many of the smaller areas you are making. You want to put your emphasis where you can, and you want to take some advantage of some opportunities that may arise within a particular geography. And that might mean making larger areas. The DC had 10 areas about, as I counted it.
Yes.
I counted the same number. So. Either we're both good at math or we're both bad at it, but we arrived at the same number. Yeah, listen, I think you heard this from them too, that there is a balance of having target areas that are small enough to actually make this an impactful exercise, but large enough where you actually can really see what you're talking about and can actually achieve something. So the that is a balance, like everything else is going to be in this. I appreciate the cautionary tale. I really appreciate all of the conversation that we've had, the numerous meetings prior to this to get us to this point, to look at what DC has done, to look at what the targets are, to think through what this exercise could be. I know a lot of work by planning staff has occurred, and really excited by the fact that this is the beginning of this conversation. The goal here was not to have something completely and fully baked and packaged and ready to go and then tell the committee what was going to happen. The goal was to create a general idea and a framework for what we were looking to accomplish and a general pathway and how to get there and get feedback from the committee. Our intention is to get some feedback now and then to come back in or around June after the budget with next steps and with our next part of this process. So with that, why don't I turn to Director Stern, and then you can turn to your team and we can go through the presentation. I'm sure we'll have some questions and comments throughout.
Thank you to the committee. Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director from the Planning Department. Just wanted to give some very brief remarks so that the staff from the Countywide Planning and Policy Division can jump into our presentation and share a lot of data that I think will be very informative for this conversation. The first is that the Planning Department has been a very active participant of COG in its various committees. The Planning Director's Technical Advisory Committee, of which I've been a participant for several years. Lisa Gavoni, our housing planner, has been a participant of the Housing Directors Committee, and we've also been engaged with Region Forward as well. And so we are very supportive of COG's leadership around the region on this topic. As Lisa noted, we were very involved in supporting the Regional Housing Targets effort back in 2018, 2019. I remember a lot of those meetings myself. There was a lot of work that went into this. And so we certainly appreciate the committee's interest in taking the next step and looking at what can we do now within Montgomery County to actually make these targets a reality and to produce more housing for all of our residents. The last thing I wanted to note at this point is in listening to the conversation and the previous presentations, this is a good reminder of Thrive Montgomery 2050's overarching, goal of housing for all and making sure that we meet the diverse housing needs throughout the county. And, our department, from our perspective, we see this effort to create these more refined sets of targets as a really good strategy to start to look at how can we create some more tailored strategies that will better address the different needs around the county. So with that, I will turn it over to Jason Sartori.
Great. Thank you. For the record, Jason Sartori, Chief of Countywide Planning and Policy at the Planning Department. And I want to begin first by thanking the committee and each of you individually for including us and engaging us in this greatly needed conversation. The housing crisis that we talk about is very real. And what makes it a crisis, however, is that it is multifaceted. The crisis is not just one of affordability. It's also about a lack of supply. It's also about, as we mentioned earlier, the mismatch of supply and demand or need, and it's about stalled housing production. It's also about a need to reinvest in our communities without gentrification or displacement, and it's about ensuring a sustainable future by appropriately locating housing for current and future residents in places that reduce our dependence on motor vehicles to access our jobs and other major centers of activity. So it's an all of the above type of thing. And indeed, the housing crisis is about ensuring the basic human right to housing as identified in Thrive Montgomery 2050. But it is also clearly a major part of our economic development, equity, and climate crises that we must address as a county. And just as the housing crisis is multifaceted, so must be the solutions that we pursue. There is no single solution to the housing crisis. We must think strategically through an all-of-the-above approach, ensuring that the solutions we pursue are connected and support each other. And this discussion today is a great next step in preparing and pursuing that strategy. Next slide. So before I pass it off to Ms. Gavoni, I want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that has already been done regarding housing in the county. With the support of the council, planning has studied just about every single aspect of housing, from rental housing to older adult housing, and from missing middle housing to the preservation of affordable housing. We've also conducted a housing needs assessment, as Ms. Gavoni mentioned earlier, and an extensive residential capacity analysis. We've really studied housing. But under the leadership of the council, there's also been much more than studying. The council has taken quite a bit of action as well. And in the past 5 years, the council has updated the MPDU law to ensure more affordable housing is required in our highest income neighborhoods, loosened restrictions on ADUs to encourage more diverse types of housing, passed a growth and infrastructure policy that removed a housing moratorium, adopted pilot laws for WMATA-owned land and for affordable housing developers to encourage much needed housing, including housing in our most transit-oriented and transit-accessible areas, created a production fund to help HOC build more housing, and of course adopted Thrive, which calls for more of everything as it relates to housing. More housing, more types, more sizes. And finally, the council adopted a resolution signing on to the COG housing targets. And in doing so, council made a commitment to pursue innovative methods to produce more housing and also undertake efforts to analyze and find solutions to barriers to increase in housing production, particularly for housing affordable to low and moderate income households. And the planning department remains a steadfast partner with the council in tackling the housing crisis, and we look forward to working with you on this effort. Now, Ms. Gavoni will walk through some existing conditions that we think will be helpful in our conversation as we move forward with this. And I encourage you, as you look at some of the data that she will show you, to think about what might be missing, if there's something else that you think that would be helpful as we look to produce these targets in these smaller areas.
Thank you, Mr. Sartori. For the record, Lisa Gavoni with the Planning Department. So we had this conversation a little bit earlier about how we develop these housing targets. So as a quick reminder, I want to walk through Montgomery County's forecasted household growth and how that played out with the housing targets. So if you look at the third yellow column, the household growth forecasted from 2020 to 2030, we're forecasted about 31,000 households, which is a jurisdictional share of about 13%. Now this does include the city of Rockville and Gaithersburg, and you can see them broken out above where Montgomery County's 10% and Rockville and Gaithersburg are 2% and 1%. And so we applied that 13% to that additional 75,000 share, and we get about 10,000 units. And of those 10,000 household units, 8,000 would go to Montgomery County, excluding Rockville and Gaithersburg, and then 1,000 to each Rockville and Gaithersburg. So the next question is, how are we doing? And the answer is not well. Building permits have generally lagged well behind what we need to be producing, the 4,100 a year on average. And you can see 2020 and 2021, we didn't even meet what we were forecasting. So we have to play a little bit of catch up to really meet that goal. But we like Chair Friedson said, we have 7 years and the council has done a lot, and we can really work on examining those barriers to get there. So next I want to present some existing conditions about housing in Montgomery County. We're going to look at existing conditions by planning areas. We're a little bigger than Washington, D.C., so we have 28. So we might want to think about how we can condense these. I think there's some, common denominators of, the agricultural reserve, for example. And so why did we use planning areas? So the planning areas, there are sub-areas of the county that were defined in very early documents of MNCPPC, and these boundaries have not changed over time. So you think about a master plan, those boundaries change. The policy areas and the growth and infrastructure policy, those boundaries change every 4 years. And also, we already used this for one other housing initiative. Like Mr. Sartori mentioned, in 2018, the MPDU law was changed so that high-income planning areas would have a 15% MPD requirement. So that is already being used for planning areas. So these are the existing conditions we're going to walk through today. We're going to walk through pretty much everything from total units to pipeline to the affordable housing to equity focus areas. But like Mr. Sartori said, we're happy if the council or anyone that's watching has an idea of how they would like to see more data parsed out. We're happy to work with them. So the first existing condition is total housing units by planning area. The darker the color, the blue on the map, the more housing units they have. So you can see that Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Germantown, Gaithersburg vicinity, and Kensington, Wheaton, they have the most housing units. Not surprisingly, a lot of our agricultural reserve planning areas, Martinsburg, Dickerson, Bennett, Lower Seneca, they have the least amount of housing units. And we also normalize this by acres. Some of these planning areas are a little smaller than others. And when we normalize by acres, the planning areas with the highest units per acre include Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, the city of Gaithersburg, and North Bethesda. And again, continuing that trend, the ones with the least amount of units per acre include a lot of the planning areas in the agricultural reserve. We also looked at this a different way of what percent multifamily of units are in each planning area. And not surprisingly, Silver Spring has a lot of multifamily. Almost 3 out of every 4 units in Silver Spring is a multifamily unit. But we also have over 50% in North Bethesda, Tacoma Park, and Gaithersburg City. But we also have planning areas that don't have any multifamily housing at all, and that again includes a lot of the agricultural reserve, Patuxent, Bennett, Dickerson, Lower Seneca, Martinsburg in that dark green. So we also looked at how many units have been built in each planning area since 2013. So Bethesda, Chevy Chase, the Gaithersburg vicinity area, Clarksburg, and Silver Spring, they've all seen over 3,000 units built since 2013, which is high. The Bethesda Chevy Chase planning area has seen the most growth, over 5,500 units since 2013, which is high and great, and we love to see it. But on the other side, we've seen low growth in the agricultural reserve, not surprisingly. But we also have Kemp Mill, Four Corners, in Tacoma Park, who have all added less than 100 units to their housing inventory. And then we looked at the percent of that total housing stock that had been built since 2013. And this is really interesting because there's one very clear winner. Over 45% of Clarksburg units have been built since 2013. And then you look at the next tier down, Gaithersburg vicinity, Silver Spring, Bethesda, where it ranges from 13 to 17%. So we're seeing, a lot of new growth in Clarksburg. But then we see, there's, again, not a lot has been built in the agricultural reserve. And then Aspen Hill, Kemp Mill, Four Corners, and Tacoma Park have seen very little growth too. The development pipeline in Montgomery County it's an inventory of development projects that have been approved by the planning board, but they're not yet completely built. And these does include Rockville, Gaithersburg, Laytonsville, and Poolesville pipelines. Those projects are included too. The planning areas with the most unbuilt units include North Bethesda, Bethesda Chevy Chase, Silver Spring, Gaithersburg vicinity, and Clarksburg. All those planning areas have at least 4,000 pipeline units that are unbuilt. But then we see Tacoma Park, Lower Seneca, Dickerson, Bennett, and Martinsville. They all have less than 20 units approved but unbuilt. So next we looked at existing affordable housing, rental housing by planning area. In the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, they maintain a database of all affordable rental projects in the county. Now, these are income-restricted affordable housing units. So they include MPDUs, they include low-income housing tax credits, Section 8 units, or units through another affordable housing program. This does not include our naturally occurring affordable housing, and it does not include the nearly 3,600 homeownership MPDUs that we have. We're working on getting that integrated, but we just did not have that completed. So in terms of affordable housing, Silver Spring clearly has the most, nearly 3,000 affordable housing units. And the Kensington Wheaton planning area has nearly 2,000, and the Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and Aspen Hill have about 1,500. But not surprisingly, given their just lack of multifamily and rental housing, there's 7 planning areas, mostly in the agricultural reserve, that don't have any affordable rental housing. And then we looked at the planning, the percent of a planning area's total units that are affordable. So again, some caveats: this doesn't include the homeownership MPDUs, and we had to use total units instead of rental units because the data couldn't parse it out. But Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, Damascus, Kensington Wheaton, and Aspen Hill, they all have over 5% of their housing stock as affordable. Silver Spring leads that with 13%. And I want to make a note of Damascus because it kind of sticks out as blue. They only have 4 affordable housing projects, but a lot of their multifamily rental that they do have is affordable. So it kind of pops out and it's blue there. So equity focus areas are parts of Montgomery County that are characterized by high concentrations of lower income people of color who may also speak English less than very well. Our research department at Montgomery Planning developed this data-driven tool to identify and map these areas in the county in order to assess potential racial and social inequities. So when we look at it, over half of Fairland and over half of Kensington Wheaton are in an equity focus area, followed by 46% of Tacoma Park and Gaithersburg City, and Aspen Hill at nearly 40%. So those are the equity focus areas by planning area. And then we talked a little bit earlier about the forecast and its role in developing the housing targets. And this map shows where forecast round 9.1 sees the most household change. And again, forecasts are based on a variety of sources, including local development, our pipeline, population, economic trends, models of Washington, D.C. area population and economic base, and published state and federal statistical resources. And round 9.1, which, as mentioned earlier, is being updated, so we'll have a round 10 soon. The highest share of household growth envisioned is that darker blue in North Bethesda, Rockville, Clarksburg, and Silver Spring. I believe this round was done before the adoption of the Bethesda Downtown Plan, and I'd imagine round 10 is going to look a little different for the Bethesda area. But we also, the forecast also sees almost no household growth in Tacoma Park, Kemp Mill, and Four Corners, Aspen Hill, Dickerson, or Martinsburg. And then we looked at Thrive Montgomery 2050's growth tiers, and I'll use this slide as a little bit of a reminder of the 3 areas, and then we'll get into some analysis by planning area. So we have the corridor focused growth area, which is the lightest blue, and that's where the most developed part of the county is. It has the highest density population, employment centers, and infrastructure to support existing and new development. And then we have the limited growth area, and this contains mainly suburban residential communities where limited organic growth is envisioned, and that's to meet needs for localized services and provide a range of housing choices and increase racial and socioeconomic integration to help achieve complete communities. And then we have the rural areas in the agriculture reserve, and this will continue to be dedicated primarily to agricultural, rural open space, and environmental preservation. It can absorb some growth, but as it continues to evolve. So then we looked at what percent of the planning area is in corridor focused growth area. Not surprisingly, we have planning areas like North Bethesda, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and Germantown. But I also want to note that we have planning areas like Kensington Wheaton, Fairland, Kemp Mill, and Tacoma Park, where they are the majority of corridor focused growth areas, and we're undertaking master plans in a lot of those areas. We have the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan, the Fairland Briggs Cheney Plan, and the University Boulevard Plan, where we are looking at ways to increase our housing production there and planning areas that might have not seen as much growth as others, but we think as part of the commitment to housing targets and the vision in Thrive, we could put more housing there. And so finally, as part of Thrive Montgomery 2050, planning staff completed a residential development capacity analysis, which is an estimate of the total potential residential development that exists within Montgomery County. And this was estimated using assumptions and methodology that we built out, and it includes constraints like market trends, zoning rules, and existing policy decisions. So it's not pure zoning capacity, but it's an educated guess based on trends and where the market is going and where we think capacity is likely. And like Chair Friedson said, it's not just zoning. When we undertook this COG exercise, I believe every single jurisdiction was asked to analyze their zoning capacity, and every single one of them said, we have zoning. But that doesn't mean people stop needing housing. And so when we undertake plans like University Boulevard and Tacoma Park, we're looking at new ways to envision housing in Montgomery County. But what I wanted to show with this is that there are 7 planning areas that have capacity for over 5,000 units, including Rockville, North Bethesda, Kensington Wheaton, Bethesda Chevy Chase, Gaithersburg City, and Silver Spring, and Fairland. And we also have a lot of planning areas, not surprisingly, a trend we've talked about today, that have very little capacity for new housing unit in our agricultural reserve. So I want to put it all together and share some takeaways from the existing conditions we just went through. I know I went through them very quickly and I talked very fast, so I thought it would be nice to pull together the conclusion. So there's varied existing conditions throughout the planning areas, and that really highlights what Director Stern was saying, is that we need to create context-sensitive targets. But not surprisingly, the current residential capacity, existing housing, planned development, that's all concentrated down county and along the I-270 corridor. And when we're looking at creating targets, these targets should really capitalize on this existing planned capacity, but we can also look to the corridor-focused growth areas identified in Thrive Montgomery for opportunities for increased housing production and to assist with the creation of complete communities. And I think that's it for my presentation.
If I can just add something really
Please.
quickly. A lot of the data that Lisa showed, obviously is to show the existing conditions to help inform this conversation. But one question for the committee is also in thinking about, in terms of the next step, what are the different factors, the different types of data that we will actually use to actually develop the targets? We offer all of these different options as some ideas of potential factors that could go into the methodology for creating the targets. So if you have any feedback on any of those, that would also be helpful for us as well.
Yeah, I want to turn to colleagues in a minute. I know Councilmember Jawanda has some questions and comments. Before I do that, though, there's 2 kind of glaring big threshold questions as part of this before we hammer into those specific details, Director Stern, that you just noted. One is, how many of these areas should we focus on and what should it be based on? I think the planning areas as they are defined make sense, but I think there are some caveats that we should discuss and decide whether it's appropriate. For instance, Rockville and Gaithersburg are not included in our targets. They should probably be taken out. I think there's a real question of the agricultural reserve and, what is the benefit of having areas that we do a deep dive into and set an expectation when it's very limited, if, any part of the, real strategy here, and it's not necessarily consistent with Thrive. And I think, when it comes, so that's kind of the first question. Do we use the planning areas? Is that generally the size of the areas that we focus on, and is it consistent because it's already areas that you use? You heard from DC, they used essentially their version of planning areas as defined in their comprehensive plan. I mean, that would be a similar approach to them. Is some version of somewhere around 28, comparing us to DC. Is that an appropriate number? We're 550 square miles. They don't have an agricultural reserve, for instance. So I think that's something that we should discuss and determine walking out of here. I think would be helpful. The question of the municipalities, I think that's a real question that we ought to think through and determine. And then I'll just say at a high level, as we go through the various specific points in terms of methodology, the goal here is to be consistent with Thrive. So I do think activity center focus, I do think corridor focused, transit oriented corridors. We spent a lot of time and energy and effort refining what that vision would be, and the goal here is intended, as I have put it forward to the committee, to be consistent with Thrive. And so I think that's the high level goal, but the specific execution of that goal should be similarly consistent. So as we go through these various decision points, my intention, my goal, my hope for colleagues is that we are consistent with how Thrive views these issues, just like we would in any other exercise or any other plan. So with that, I'll turn to Councilmember Jawanda, who I think has a few questions and comments.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate the presentation. I noticed when I clicked the link, I didn't get the email. It's not clicked on the link to the website. So if we could just make sure that happens. I was trying to pull it up now. I'm sure you all sent it. We just didn't get it up. So just want to make sure I get it, because there's a lot of good stuff in there that I hadn't seen in that way exactly before. So, just to your point, Director Stern, as far as feedback, one of the things I would like to see as we're analyzing, I agree, consistent with Thrive. We spend a lot of time on the quarter, on the principles in Thrive, so it makes sense. And while there are folks who do want us to change the way the agricultural reserve is zoned, I don't think they're on this council. So I do think, as far as like goals, it would make sense to focus on where we are actually going to have the growth and where we want the growth to happen. One of the things I'd also like to see is, particularly in related, and I alluded to this earlier, and we've talked about this offline, Ms. Scavone and I at least have, and others, is related to the pipeline. I just want, I want all of the above solutions. I don't want just one set of solutions. I'd like to, and I think one of the solutions we have, if we talk about what can we do as folks who are elected to serve on behalf of the public to solve problems and then hopefully not create more, is we have laws that we can pass, right? We have our land use and zoning authority, right, which we ask our planning board to utilize and make recommendations to us on our behalf, and we have funding, right? And so, which in the laws is the kind of ancillary, and land use and zoning is the regulatory authority we have. So around the pipeline, for example, I would like to see, as part of this discussion, some analysis on, really detailed analysis, which I have not seen yet. It might exist. I'm sure it exists somewhere in the bowels of planning. But around why is, when were things approved? Why are they sitting where they are? What could be potential innovative strategies across the country to encourage? And so I think I just want to make sure that we are getting feedback on the whole range of potential incentives, which you all have, we've done a lot. In the last council, we have created revolving loan funds for HOC. We've done tax abatements for, we've had big discussions on, and there's more to come on all of those things. But also I want to make sure we're looking at the other side as well, and how we might use our regulatory authority to incentivize. I also would like to see Council Vice President Friedson mentioned, for example, the history of the MPDU program, right, and our inclusionary zoning. We were one of, if not, and are we the first, or were we the first? I've argued with people in New York before.
We were the
Okay, that's what I thought. I'm going to tell them they're wrong. Gosh dang it.
You could say, Lisa told me so.
Yeah, Lisa said we were the first, and kind of how that has, what that has meant over time, in that it was 12.5% for until 2018, right? Pretty much. I mean, with some exceptions, people, based on the individual deal and how much money was given to, or what incentives were given, and then it went to 15% in the high income areas, which is defined as what again?
It's 150% of the median.
Right. Okay. Which.
And every new plan.
Right. Yeah, and every new plan. Right.
Yeah, every single new plan that has happened
That
since
we do, yeah.
that decision. So on a broad basis, it was without reopening every plan in every high income area, we automatically made that 15%. And every new plan that we've taken up, even when it didn't qualify under the high income areas, we have set 15% as the standard in every recent plan that we have proposed.
So when we took up the Veers Mill Master Plan, which was our first plan that we did when we came on which was fun. That was a fun one to come into. So I think looking at some analysis of what that's meant over time, and I'm going to let you respond, Ms. Scavone, and how that has been, either, baked into the cost of doing business, or how it compares to other folks in the country. We heard a little anecdotal from DC what they're doing in that area. So I just want to make sure when we have the discussion, we're having a full kind of fulsome discussion. I'm sorry, you're going to respond.
Well, no, I think that's great. I will say, as part of our CR point benefit analysis, that is something that we are looking at, is just the cost of the incentive for MPDUs, because you have to think, we have bonus density, and we have pilots, and we have all these other incentives in the county. So we're trying to figure out, what's the true cost of an MPDU? And we did a little bit of work on that in the rental housing study, but I think it's a question that, keeps coming keeps coming up, and so I think it would be really insightful to better understand that.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn?
And just what comes to mind when I heard you asking the questions was possibly thinking about the pipeline and thinking about the places, the geographic locations in the county where we have the 15%. Does that, what is the connection between the pipeline where we're not getting movement forward and now those requirements, if there is any? There may not be, but that could be interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We recently worked with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs to kind of figure out what is in the MPDU and workforce housing pipeline too. And so we can map that, we can share that with you, because I think it's really valuable information of, where are we getting 15%, and there are still areas of the county, a lot of the county, that are still 12.5. Right. And so figuring out where we're getting what.
Yeah, and also to the cost of it, what it's costing to produce it is, that's a great point. You can say something.
Yeah, so I really appreciate the comments here, and I think it's absolutely right. I think on the one hand, the development pipeline and the MPDU pipeline is important as part of this conversation and this exercise, and should be included, because it's part of where we are and what will happen if we do nothing. In the transportation environment, it would be like the no build option. Here's the projection if we don't pursue this particular approach. Here's what it would look like, and I think we need that as a baseline as we start to break down this conversation. I think on the individual policies and proposals, which are going to be part of the conversation, I think that is a second step. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. The first step here, the first goal here, is to set the targets as they are, to say, okay, what is the total countywide target that we have agreed to? And then how do you break that down in more manageable ways, more on the ground version of that, and what should we base that on? We're not going to evenly distribute the housing necessarily in each planning. So if there are 28, we're not going to just divide the number by 28. We wouldn't need to have committee sessions to talk about that. Planning wouldn't need to spend all the time working on that. We would just get out a calculator and figure out the number. So that's the first question, is what are the factors that would help us determine where we want the housing? Is it how heavily do we weight quarter focus? How heavily do we weight mixed income? In order for each of these planning areas to achieve a certain level of affordable housing that is not in existence now. And you heard DC, that was very much their approach. And then the second step of this process is the goal, which I'm hoping this will be a baseline and will help guide us for the next several years of this term, but also for councils moving forward and this committee moving forward beyond that, is then, okay, what are the policies that we actually need to do to get to the goal? And that includes all of the above strategies, some of which you were mentioning. So I just want to make sure we differentiate that. I don't think we're going to be able to flesh out each policy proposal as part of it, but I do think where are we currently, and if we do nothing new, where will that take us, broken down as part of this effort, is critical, as you noted, and detailed analysis based on that. And then I think, understanding as we move forward, then what are all the different strategies, what's happening in other jurisdictions, how are other places grappling with these issues, some of the impressive things that DC is trying, how are those working, are they applicable here? I think will be the next step of this process, at least how I envision it. So I just want to be clear.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's right. The planning slide went into a lot of things that we had done in the past. It alluded to, so it was kind of a mixed bag, but absolutely. And the last point I was going to make was about where affordable housing is located, because you went into that. And as part of that analysis, we saw kind of, in graphical color form. But I also think that will factor into our decisions of where is the growth needed and what are the target goals based on levels of income. And, and I think we know anecdotally some of that, but putting numbers on that and having a goal and how, and then to your point, to the chair's point, how we get there is a different question. And some of the things I mentioned, I think should be part of it. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Turn to Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thanks. Thank you again for letting me crash today. I really appreciate this. And I just 2 points, and I think, based on the conversation we were just having, like slide 20 was really very helpful in terms of showing the growth area focused, and I think it goes to like where the potential is, and just what Councilmember Jawando was saying. Obviously, I am intimately familiar with Tacoma Park, and one of the reasons we saw earlier there hasn't been a lot of growth, but now you're showing some growth potential, is because of a minor master plan that we are undertaking. And that is an area where before it was zoned just for single family homes right now, but hopefully as we're going through this process, we will see that it opens up to more potential. So I think also helping us identify where we might be able to open up for more potential is really going to be important as well. So I really appreciated this slide. And I think you agree with me, right? You're nodding your head. Okay.
I agree, yes.
Good. And the other thing, and I know we just mentioned the Ag Reserve, and I don't know if I'm sitting in Councilmember Balcom's seat or that's over here. I do want to say that, what I was able recently to have lunch with some folks, advocates at Locals in Poolesville, same day. Councilmember Jawando was there and Councilmember Balcom. And one of the things I actually heard from some folks there, some of the advocates, is the housing need for workers on the farms. And because of, and I may get this wrong, so you should talk to the people there, but just in terms of the people who are now working on at the Ag Reserve, there isn't a lot of affordable housing or apartments and other things that they can avail themselves of, and we're seeing, I guess, less migration and people staying more year-round. And so, again, I just got one conversation on this, but I do think it is a place where looking at what the need might be, it's not going to be like, blue like Silver Spring or other places, but it's something I had not thought about in terms of where there may be housing needs, particularly affordable housing. So, thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I think that is a separate topic that I think is a very important topic that we need to take up. I think it would be hard to include that in a countywide housing target type strategy. I do think, with immigration related issues and work visas and other dynamics and just the overall labor shortage, the dynamics of labor in agriculture, like every other industry, has changed a lot over the last few years, and I think you raise a really important point that we need to take a look at, and it speaks to the connection of housing to economic development that we talk a lot about, which used to be part of this committee, but now we have a whole separate committee to deal with that. You are in the chair of the economic development committee member. So I think that's important. And I'll also say, so one, I think we should, it sounds like looking at what's in the agricultural reserve and not having those as separate areas that we do deep dives of targets into doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. To not do the work of the municipalities unless they ask us to. There's 2 municipalities that have their own targets. I think we can encourage them to undertake a similar effort and to follow our example, and I think we'll do most of the work for them, it would seem, because they can mirror what we have done based on the methodology that we have used if they agree with us, but they have the right to disagree should they so choose. But I have a feeling that they're as committed to these issues as we are, but we shouldn't presuppose that. And having an overall view of following the priorities of Thrive, which is our adopted land use strategy and growth strategy, for the county. So I want to make sure you're hearing that from the committee members and our crasher, who is never a crasher, and never a guest, and always welcome. So I just wanted to note that. I will also say I am interested in us having an overall target for 2050, like DC has, in terms of percentage of affordable housing in each of the designated areas that we use. Planning areas, it sounds like is what we're going to ultimately adopt. And I would like that to be part of the resolution. So I want to set that out from the beginning. That is my intention as the chair of the committee. I hope I have the agreement of the committee. I can't imagine there will be disagreement on that, but is 15% the right number? I'm not sure. We do have different land use patterns than DC has, but we should figure out what the target number is. We should use 2050 as they have, which is a separate but related goal to the housing targets, and I think would be important for us to include as part of this effort. And I'll just note the intention here is for this work to occur and ultimately for us to be proposing before the full council resolution. We adopted the housing targets by resolution, and my hope and my goal and my intention is that we could be proposing these refined targets and formally adopting them by the council as well. That would be step one, and then step two would be then using that as the basis for much of what Councilmember Jawando was talking about earlier. What does more housing for more people mean? What does an all of the above strategy mean? How do we actually accomplish these goals? What has worked in other places? What has been tried in other places? What are we doing? What's working? What's not working? And so that would be how I would envision it. Councilmember Jawando?
Yeah, just wanted to add on that point. In addition to, I do agree with having the goals, and I think, as I said, it makes sense to take out the municipalities and obviously include them in our county number, but it's their responsibility, but we're not including it in our goal. Anything we can do to get out of the hole that Mr. Chair of Science talked about a little bit. But also, if we're going to have a target, I'd love to, one of the things I was going to ask our DC partners was, I'm assuming their 15% target was at 60% of AMI, like the same as our MPDUs. Is that right? Do we know that?
Yeah, I think theirs was 15% at 60, but our MPDUs are 65%.
Right, ours are, yes, right, ours are a little higher. I would just want to see if there's a way to also have a goal within of, at the level of affordability of, or just because that 60%, when we set that 65%, that meant something different than it means now with the growth of income inequality and the cost of housing. So I just would like us to, and it's an open question. You don't have to, if you have any thoughts now, I'd love to hear it. But if we're going to set a goal about what affordability, at a level of affordability, I think we should talk about what that means for the levels of affordability. Does that Make sense?
Just to make sure that I understand, so are you thinking about having, for instance, because there are different levels of affordability, of different sort of area, AMIs, having sort of a target for each of those AMIs? I'm trying to understand,
Yes.
or just
If that's
or at
if that's
say
workable.
60 or 60%.
No, I'm talking about the AMI levels. Just because when you present the goal, when we present the COG goal, as I've heard it stated, it's like we need these numbers, this number of housing, 30,000, 30 whatever, what is it? Whatever the number is. 41,000.
It's 10,000 above 31,000.
Right, that's where I'm getting the 31. So 10,000 above 31,000, so 41,000. But that X percent, and you can answer that again too, I don't want to quote it wrong, needs to be at a certain level of affordability.
Let us look into that.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I understand your question.
There's two standards really in the COG housing targets, overarching. One is activity centers, the percentage that should be focused in activity centers specifically because of access to jobs, amenities, and public transit and transportation. And then number two are levels of affordability. It would be helpful to take that back and determine that and what is doable in particular areas. I think I will note that if it's not doable by specific affordability levels, if that's too granular for what this exercise ultimately is going to be able to accomplish, that is something that we can include in the resolution to reinforce the countywide goal. So
No, I know.
we do have multiple tools here, and I don't want and I'm not saying you're intending this, but the perfect to be the enemy of the good, and so I think it would be helpful at the very least for planning to take back that thought process, and then we have other options as well that we could address that.
I do have a follow-up question. So specifically in terms of the COG regional target, as you mentioned, Chair Friedson, it's at least 75% of new housing should be affordable to low and middle income households.
Right.
So a question, we can go back and look at the specific, AMI levels that were used for that, but I guess my question is, are we focusing primarily on the low income households, or do we also include middle income households? Because this...
No, I think you can have goals for both.
Okay.
I just think it would be important, since that is embedded in the goal, I think we should, because a lot of times it just gets lumped in together and people hear 15% affordable and you're not talking about what where the most of the need is,
And I would add that when we get to a point where we're talking about how to actually achieve these, you're going to have a different set of tools that we're going to have to call upon and pursue to achieve those different. So I think it's good for us to be thinking about this, and we'll see what we can pull together in terms of numbers right now.
I appreciate it.
I do have another follow-up question just to make sure that we understood.
Sure.
The feedback. This relates to the ag reserve, and so I heard Councilmember Stewart noting that an issue that she has heard about, affordable or housing that's affordable to ag workers, but then a larger question of whether or not we focus on or include the ag reserve in coming up with these targets. So I just want to make sure we understand.
So, sorry, I thought I spoke to that. So
that we weren't going to include it.
I think it's an important point that is being raised that we should do a deep dive into. I'm not sure, given the size of the amount of housing that we're talking about vis-a-vis the targets, as we heard from the discussion from Ms. Gavoni and the analysis, I'm not sure that this would be the best avenue in order to approach that. It's not to say that it's not an important issue. It is. It's not to say that we shouldn't address it. We should, and I intend that we will. But I'm not sure, as part of this exercise, we're opening this effort up to relitigating a much bigger decision if we make the ag reserve a core part of achieving the 41,000 housing units that we need to create, and what that means for the other policy priorities that we have for smart growth development, for corridor focused and activity centers. It also, given the COG targets emphasize activity centers and corridor, and Thrive focus on corridor, transit-oriented corridors and that type of smart growth. My personal view is we should leave out the ag reserve. We should focus on the acute, specific issue for ag workers and housing as a separate issue that we can and should take up, because I think it's a very important issue, and move forward in that regard.
Yeah, and is that, yeah, and
Yes,
I
that's
generally
clear.
agree with that, except I just want to make sure that we should still find a way to count that housing. Like, we should not count it. There shouldn't necessarily be a emphasis or focus on it, I don't think. Like, in the, like, if you're going to, from this broader plan of, like, we need to get 41,000, and here's how we're going to get there, I don't think we should be leaning on the ag reserve to get there, obviously. But to the extent that, one of the areas where they are building housing in Poolsville. I mean, and so I think we should count the number.
Well, Poolsville as a municipality technically is not part of the
that's not a good example.
ag reserve,
That's
but
not a good example.
so I think
Damascus.
take this back, but I think looking at the entire ag reserve perhaps as its own area.
I think
would be that's how I envisioned it, and that would have a number
X.
associated with it. That would be part of it, but it would be a small enough number that going planning area by planning area within the ag reserve
do that.
seems unnecessary and would cause, I think, more problems than it would solve. So I think we're saying the same thing. Obviously, Poolsville is a municipality that does do zoning and does have quite a bit of housing, and actually has multifamily housing, has missing middle housing, has more than just single family or large lot housing. That should be part of the discussion as well. They don't have their own housing targets; they're part of the county's target. So.
Just to close that point, and thank you for that clarification. That's what I thought I was hearing, but I wanted to just be crystal clear about that. But it's just in this conversation, there have been some related topics that we may ultimately not focus on as part of this project. But what we could do is just capture those. We kind of call them putting it on the bike rack, so that the idea is not lost. And, it's something that could be sort of captured separately, that, the committee can focus on it at a later time, but we just wanted to make sure that we got some clarification on it.
Yeah, we can circle back, conversation with planning staff and council staff to determine next steps and to clarify on that. But I just want to make sure. So do you feel like you have a framework here to come up with recommendations on a methodology that you can move forward with related to how we would break these down, both in a new map that has the planning areas, that's going to be a number that is less than 28, no more than 28, because we're going to combine some from there, but in that neighborhood, probably of 18 to 28, I would say we probably end up with 20 to 28. Does that seem reasonable in terms of a number and an approach? And do you have a general framework with which to move forward with methodology recommendations?
I'm also looking over at Lisa to see if she has any other questions, but I think I think we do. At this point, Lisa, if there's anything else that we feel needs that we need to ask about, please jump in. I think also, frankly, even in looking at the data, I mean, obviously the growth corridors that we identified as part of Thrive, and that, frankly, reflects a lot of earlier planning decisions from other master plans. I mean, to me, it kind of highlights areas that should be a focus, just in looking at the existing data right now. So part of the question, I think, for me was, what other areas should we not focus on, should or should not be a priority? So I think the conversation about how to deal with the ag reserve is helpful. And we can, look at some of the other planning areas, but I think this has been very helpful. And Lisa, anything else?
Thank you for your guidance. It was very helpful.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. The goal is to come back in or around June to have a refined version of the refinement of these goals and a methodology. We won't be agreeing on numbers and moving forward with that. We'll be agreeing on an approach and directing the department to go ahead and move forward and do the work, and then ultimately we would essentially be coming back in the fall with the results of that work and the results of that methodology. But so we'd come back in June, we'd really hone in on what the methodology is going to look like, what the approach is going to be, what the plan is going to be for moving forward. and then we would take this work up along with planning in the fall, and then the goal would be to be able to have something ready to go to the council by resolution to adopt targets probably in the early part of, before this time next year, essentially, but probably next calendar year. I just want to set expectations for everybody who's watching and for colleagues on that. Are there any other comments or questions? Before we close out on this, and we're going to move to the next topic, I didn't want to do this in the beginning of the conversation, but did think it was important as a committee to express our shared condolences to everybody in Nashville. Unfortunately, yet another example of a school being victimized and terrorized by gun violence, and a place that should be the safest place on earth, where children are going to learn, that is irreparably changed lives, irreparably impacted a community that is terrorized by gun violence in another school. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on that, to note that, express our condolences, and to send our thoughts and prayers to everybody in Nashville. Appreciate that. We're going to move on now to our next topic. We'll thank our guests for joining us here. And with that, I will call up our council staff to help us walk through the packet. We have Ms. Nadeau, who is going to be joining us here, and we are going to go through this agenda item. And while she is coming up, we have the Planning Board Regulation 2522, Administrative Procedures for Development Review. Chair Zients is still with us. We have a number of colleagues from the Planning Department. We have Ms. Dunn, who is still with us, and as I mentioned, Ms. Nadeau, who has joined us at the table. February 6th, the Planning Board transmitted its draft amendments to the Administrative Procedures for Development Review. It was a unanimous vote by the board to transmit the regulations, which I believe was at the end of September of 2022. And this was introduced at the County Council earlier this month on March 7th. It's a Method 2 regulation, and the Council has 60 days to approve or disapprove. If the Council does not act within 60 days, the regulation is automatically approved. Because the Council will be on recess when the 60-day period is officially over. An extension has been scheduled for the consent agenda on the 28th. So I'll just turn to Ms. Nadeau to clarify and add any additional comments.
Sure. So this is one of those great regulations where the bulk of the work was done, so there shouldn't be too much for the committee here. What the resolution does is there were a few changes made to the procedures for development review based on just changes in law that have happened over time. For example, the approval of the biohealth campus, some changes in forest conservation. So most of the amendments here are correcting and clarifying language that is in those procedures. There are a few substantive changes. They begin on page 2. I can read through them quickly, and then if you have any questions, let me know. So first is adding provisions for new plan types. The two types here being Signature Business Headquarters and the Biohealth Priority Campus. The notice provisions for forest conservation plans were changed in 2021, so adding those to the procedures as well. Clarifying how notice is sent. So the current procedures require hearing notices by regular mail or email. So this clarifies that official notice is sent by mail but doesn't preclude additional email notice. In addition, removing provisions related to consent agenda. You may remember in 2022, Planning Board's rules of procedures were changed to remove the consent agenda. So all those references have been taken out of the administrative procedures. Next, clarifying the procedures for amending a sketch plan. as well as updating the deadlines and requirements for witnesses to sign up and submit exhibits. Number 7 is adding additional items to the list of instances where the director has to cede authority back to the planning board to make a decision. One example there is administrative subdivisions to the planning board for flag lots and lots without frontage, which, well, you're both on Fed last year, so you'll remember when we discussed those. And then updating the timelines for the withdrawal of inactive applications. So those are the more substantive changes that are being made. I did want to note a couple small corrections that council staff found. They are very minor, which is good because under 2A15, which is what makes these Method 2 regulations, the issuer of the regulations can go ahead and make those changes, and as long as there was proper notice, the council can still approve them. So they're little things like the word plan is missing. There's one instance where the signature business plan isn't noted, and then the section headers should note that it's amending both 50 and 59. So those minor corrections can be made, and council staff can update the resolution in time for council to approve it as a whole.
Appreciate that. Thank you for that update. Any additional comments from the planning board or planning staff?
Just want to say this is going in the directions that you want us to go, particularly with regard to the dead plan in process. You know, this would expire a plan in 180 days instead of 165 days. So if there's absolute inaction, it can expire. In all other regards, it's a little bit better notice, and it puts better into our regulations the fact that the planning board doesn't have a consent agenda. In all other respects, it conforms to the legislative change the council has already made and make some corrections.
Appreciate that. Okay, so this is an update and a review. There is a extension, the packet notes for the 28th. So are you recommending that we just move forward with the extension, that we would take this up at the council at a later date, or what is the council staff recommendation here?
So for committee today, it's to recommend approval of the resolution. The extension is going to be on the consent calendar tomorrow before the full council, and I believe the tentative date is that first day back in April after our 1 week.
And this
recess.
to allow appropriate public notice.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So that was my understanding. I just want to make sure I understood correctly. So without objection, we will recommend approval and note that this will be extended by the council tomorrow to allow for additional time for public notice. And if there is, public input that is received, we can take that under consideration at a later date.
Well, hopefully there shouldn't be any more public input because there was a public comment period and the planning board hearing. But of course, if people have testimony,
sure, but we're extending it, and so we're allowing for that opportunity. Okay, with that, we have approved, and we are now adjourned. Thank you for joining us.
At Randolph Road and